right, well, it's 5 past. I think we can get started. So, QGIS. Weirdly, I'm not going to start by talking about QGIS because there's a lot of important stuff going on in the chart world right now. And earlier today, Noaa gave a webinar that was a public webinar, but I got an invitation for it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have known about it. So they're doing something very important that actually affects the whole context of this talk. So I want to just give a little upfront about that at the beginning. And then we'll come back, we'll talk about QGIS, we'll talk about my project. But I really want to keep it in context of this big change that's happening. So I don't know how many of you know this, but Noaa is retiring paper maps. And they're not just retiring like pieces of paper, they're actually retiring all distribution of even digital formats of the paper maps, the maps we know and use and sometimes love. And they are works of art that were created with a lot of human care, but they also produce purely digital data feeds of the kind that you see on like Navionics if you're a sailor, or all kinds of electronic devices if you're in the global shipping trade. They're very focused on delivering that. That's become the new standard. They can't afford to keep the paper map format alive and keep it updated at the same time as these purely digital formats. So that's going to cause a lot of changes and upheaval in the charting world. And everything that I've been working on is geared towards working with the beautiful paper maps of what's going to be yesteryear. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is adaptable to the new format. There's nothing about the tools we're using that means we've got to stick with the old Noaa charts as we used to know them. But there's going to be changes. And one of the biggest changes is that Noaa is introducing their own custom chart tool. In fact, it's available now. I don't think it works all that well yet, but they are committed to keeping it up and making it go. So probably a lot of you are here because you're interested in making custom charts. And so we have to keep in mind that Noaa is going to probably be the go-to source if all you want is a custom chart, but QGIS can do more. So that's the context for a lot of what we'll talk about, this big change that's coming up.
So what you said was,
yeah. Any questions about that so far? We'll do more later in the session, and maybe I'll actually show you the custom chart tool, and we can sort of compare, some of the things about it with QGIS. Has anybody here used that tool yet? The new custom chart tool from Noaa? Tim has, yeah. Well, we'll get to that. Let me start anyway, talking about the stuff that I was going to talk about. QGIS is an open source software program. I first heard about it from Margot Otway, actually, maybe about a year ago. And I guess a BASK member who I haven't met or communicated with gave a presentation to some BASK folks about it. And I got curious and started learning about it. And one of the great things I liked about it was it's very open. It's actually programmable. I'm a software guy, so that appealed to me. I thought, oh, this is something I can tailor and really make useful for myself. And then I realized, well, it could be useful for a lot of other folks if I took the time to document what I was doing and kind of make it into more of a public project. So what I'm going to do tonight is walk through the basic ways of using that project and using QGIS to make custom charts that are usable for paddling, because that's what I like to do. So I'm going to share my screen. with this number of people, I'm a little concerned about having everybody follow along in lockstep. So what I'm going to try to do is go slowly enough that hopefully many of you can tag along and try it. I'm a little wary of doing sort of live Q&A at every step. And so I think what I'm going to do is go for a while, stop, we can have some questions. I may have to cut them off depending on how stuck people got. Continue again, take more questions, continue again, take more questions. And then it's possible there'll still be residual problems for some of you at the end of the session. And that's something maybe we can work out over email or even have a follow-up for. But this is what I did with my local paddling club here, NSPN. It seemed to work. So that's what I want to try. And I see there's a chat. Franca says she hears a high-pitched sound. Do you still hear it? I hear it too. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't think it's, I muted myself and I didn't hear it. I still heard it. So maybe it's coming from somewhere else. There, it stopped. So maybe somebody knew where it was from. I'm going to share my screen. You can interrupt me. So, you know, if I'm just suddenly talking nonsense, I want to know about it. So do interrupt if I've totally gone off the rails. But otherwise, like I said, I'll stop and there'll be some pauses. All right, sharing screen now, and we will start to do things. So I'm going to skip over the actual install part of Qgis because it takes a while to download and that's not very interesting. But if you open Qgis up and you haven't opened any project yet, you'll see something sort of like this. So the first step in using my project is to download something called Noaa Template.qgz. This is a file that you open inside the Qgis program. And what it gives you is kind of a ready-made starting point for making maps. If you just use Qgis out of the box like this, it's sort of like a big blank slate and it's confusing and it seems like there's no way to get it to show anything useful. So let's download that file. And now this is probably going to be in my downloads folder. There it is, along with a bunch of other stuff, but I'll get rid of that. And now we can take this project and probably the first thing we might want to do is copy it somewhere else, somewhere where we're going to keep all of our Qgis stuff. So I'm just going to make a folder for that. Oh, I already have a folder called that from the last. Oh, good. I'll just delete all that junk. Here's my folder. I'm going to just copy my downloaded template to there. And now that it's here, I can open it up in Qgis. I could double click it, or I like to just drag and drop things. I can drag and drop it into Qgis and it should open. Okay, so here we are. And let's talk about what is actually in a project. This is Boston Harbor, by the way, because I just have it set up to show my home. So QGIS shows a set of layers that are superimposed on each other. And some of those layers are, well, all of those layers are listed on the left in the layers panel. And they have check marks to show whether they're on or off. So right now there's exactly one layer that's showing, which is NOAA's raster nav charts layer. And if we switch it off, we won't see anything. So know that all of these things are turn onable and turn offable. And some layers are flat surfaces of information like this chart layer is, or another one is OpenStreetMap, which is sort of like a free version of Google Maps with the streets, public domain. And there's also a satellite layer that I've thrown in. That's a Google Maps satellite layer. So those are all kind of flat, opaque layers. Those are called raster layers. There's another layer that is an overlay. It's not raster. It's just specific shapes. And these shapes are actually the footprints of all the NOAA charts. So we're going to use those later when I show you how to download specific charts that you're interested in. Here's another vector layer, which is tides and currents. So I've loaded in all the tides and current stations. And those are things you can access to from this environment. And then you can actually add your own things like waypoints. And I'll be talking about how to add routes as well, with bearings and distances and so forth. So two kinds of layers, flat ones with images of stuff, and overlays that are sort of partly transparent that have shapes and opaque or shaded areas and things like that. Make sense so far? Any questions about that? If you've used programs like, I don't know, drawing programs, they have a kind of layer-like structure like this too. All right, so this main display that we see is not actually something that you print. You can think of it more as a way to browse information in QGIS. And the way you browse it is by panning it, dragging it around, or making it bigger and smaller. And you can make it bigger and smaller by using whatever control on your computer scrolls a window. On my computer, that happens to be dragging two fingers up and down a trackpad. So I'm kind of scrolling it in and making it smaller right now. If I scroll it down, it'll make it bigger. And I let go and it'll kind of rescale and show me more stuff. If you have a wheel on your mouse, the wheel would do that. It varies from computer to computer. And there's also kind of, I guess you can do Command plus or Command minus to zoom in and out too. There's various different ways of doing it. There's even a zoom in, zoom out tool at the top that you can use. Anyway, that's how you navigate around. And why don't we travel to California, since that's where you all are, I think. I'm just zooming out. And now I'm looking at an incredibly zoomed out bunch of charts at a very, very high scale. I can really make it small. No, I didn't bother with the center of the country. For that, you'd need OpenStreetMap. This is kind of where OpenStreetMap comes in handy, actually. It covers the entire planet. If you ever get lost, turn on the OpenStreetMap layer and you'll see where you are, because there might not be any NOAA raster nav chart at the place that you're looking. So let's go to San Francisco. And let's turn our nav charts back on. There we go. So you may notice that this is dynamically adjusting according to our scale. It's not any, what we're looking at here is a kind of composite that NOAA has made of lots and lots and lots of paper charts. And they're all kind of digitally seamed together. And it shows you whatever resolution it thinks you care about based on how zoomed in you are. So out here, we're probably looking at one of the general charts that are at like 1 to 300,000. And as we zoom in, we're going to see more and more detail. Now we're probably going to see the coastal chart like 180,000. And as we get in even closer, we're going to see the kind of information you would see at maybe 1 to 40,000 or 120,000. So they're showing us little bits and pieces of different charts depending on what their idea is of how zoomed in we want to be, but it's still pretty useful. So you can make printed custom charts just using this without downloading any specific chart numbers or anything. So let's kind of start with that idea and see how that works. As I said, this main display, it's called the map view, and it's not something you print. It's just a way of kind of moving around and surveying what you need, what's there for you to use. To actually print something, you make something called a layout. A layout is a different window that is set up to print some specific area, and it has other properties that are useful for printed output. So let's make a layout. Everything I talk about tonight, by the way, is also on the website that I've directed you to. So don't worry too much about taking notes unless you really like to. I'm not going to cover anything that's not there in terms of recipes and instructions. So you'll go to the layout manager and you'll see that there's 4 pre-made layouts, and they're for different scales and different orientations. Landscape in 1 to 25K and 1 to 50K, and portrait in both of those. You don't really have to worry about the scale too much because you can change that. But let's say we want to make a landscape printout of the area of the Golden Gate to the west of the bridge, because we're going to do an out the gate paddle. So let's make a nice layout for that. So I'm going to pick this template and say duplicate, and I'm going to call it out the gate. That will be my new layout. And here's my new layout. Confusingly, it shows some completely different place. It's actually showing some islands in New Hampshire. That's just the way I created the template. The very first thing you need to do is actually sync this map with the main map. So here's how you do that. In this environment, you can select things by clicking on them. I can select like the title, the scale bar, whatnot. I'm going to select the map itself and right click on it and do item properties. Now on the right, I've got a bunch of things that I can do with the map. The most important thing perhaps is sync it to the main view, the one in the other window, this one. That is done by this annoyingly tiny icon here. I just think of it as the first orange icon in this row. And if you click that, it will sync this layout's map to whatever you were looking at in the main window. You may be distressed to see so little detail, but don't worry, that's going to rectify itself. The next thing is this map is way too big. It's covering way too large an area. We need to change that. So just like the main window, this layout window can be resized and moved around. To do that, you have to pick, you have to select the map first, which we have, and use this map. It says move item content. It really should be move and zoom. Once you've clicked this tool, you can now move this map around, and the grid will move with it. And you can also zoom it, and the grid will change accordingly. Also, the scale bar is adjusting. You may notice that at the same time. All right, so this will be the area of our layout. Let's get the scale bar somewhere where it's a little going to be better behaved. I have to go back to the selection tool. I'm just going to actually put the scale bar outside. I'm going to take the title and just move this outside the map. We'll make the map a little smaller. Change the title to out the gate. What did I do wrong there? Out the gate. Now I've got a layout. And this layout really is a page, and it can be printed, unlike the main map. It corresponds to part of the main map. So let's export it. Up here is an icon, export as PDF. I can also export it from the main layout menu, export as PDF. And let's save this. I'm just going to accept all the defaults. And I have to sit here and wait while it clunks along and, you know, downloads a whole bunch of images from Noaa, stuffs them into a PDF. This is a good time to play the mandolin if you have one. Okay, here's our chart. And as you can see, it's much more detailed than the layout we were looking at. Because this is a byproduct of that sort of automatic level of detail being selected based on how zoomed in you are. In a sense, the PDF is more zoomed in because it's very high resolution. Like if we blow this up, you can see just how sharp this is. It's as sharp as the original paper map almost. If you print it on a good printer, it'll look really, really, really great. So that is sort of the complete cycle of how to make one custom chart in Qgis, just using, not downloading any maps, just using the kind of straight map that they give you out of the box. So let me open it up and see if people have things they want to ask or questions, or if you've run into any problems trying this yourself. Yeah, Marco, go ahead.
Why don't you put a compass rose on that printout?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. There was no compass rose in the original chart at this place. I'm going to kind of indirectly answer your question and say we could put a compass rose, but what I find a little more useful for these custom charts rather than compass roses is compass grids that just show magnetic north lines at regular intervals. And there's a way to do that using a plugin that I developed for Qgis. So if we're out here, you can just say, make some magnetic north lines. Whoops, I have to say, use map canvas extent. That's where the lines are going to go. And where did they go? Let's see. It makes a layer sometimes, and the layer will be hidden because it's underneath something. It made a magnetic north layer for me, but it went underneath everything. So if I move it up top, now all those lines are pointed in the right direction. They're visible and they're pointed in the right direction. If I go back to the layout and refresh it, you can see those lines are superimposed here. So it's not a compass rose, but it serves the same purpose as one. And it'll work anywhere on the planet. There is a QGIS plugin that will make a compass rose, and I wonder if I actually have it. Not sure that I do. Let's see. I think I took it out. Anyway, there's a QGIS plugin that makes compass roses for you. I think it's a little clunky, but it will do that. How do you like the lines relative to roses? Do people have a view on that?
You could get used to them.
I thought the lines are much more useful.
Yeah, I find that when I'm using a hand compass on the deck, the rose is usually not where I want it. And there's always a line somewhere near where my hand compass is sitting. So I like the lines myself. If you want to look into the compass roses, I can follow up with some information on that. There's a plugin for it. I think it's just called Compass Rose, maybe. Wish I could remember.
Can you show again where this plugin of the north lines are?
Yeah, it's a plugin that you install, and it's described on the website, but I'll just go over this quickly. If you want to install a plugin, first go to settings and check off show experimental plugins. This is described on my website, so I'm going to show it here. Then you would go to all and search for compass routes, and it'll show up. And then you would just click install here, and it'll install. And then that will be available under plugins. You'll see there'll be a compass routes, and it has two choices: create route layer, which we'll show later, and create magnetic north lines, which is the one we just used.
Can I ask if you wanted to print on a different size paper, say 8.5 by 11, is that just a matter of creating a layer, changing the page setup, and then you could save that as a template?
Yeah, it is. Now it so happens that if you open this in Acrobat, like so, you can just print that to 8.5 by 11 anyway, and it looks fine. So I don't think you really have to make a layout in 8.5 by 11 format, but if you wanted to, you could right click on this page background and say page properties, and then here you would say letter. And now you can see the page background shrunk. So you're going to have to make the map smaller and move things around so that everything's back on this smaller page. See what I'm doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, that totally works. You can also make bigger pieces of paper that way too. And you can change the orientation the same way. So yeah, it's a lot like using page setup or something.
So you had several layers showing on your original
Yes.
layout, I guess.
Mhm.
Where did those come from?
So they come from different sources, and I figured out where they were and put them all together here. But each of these, some of them come from, well, they all come from the web in one way or another. The Google Maps one comes from Google. OpenStreetMap one comes from the OpenStreetMap Consortium, which is a open source entity. The Noaa Raster nav charts comes from Noaa. And so do the tide and current stations. So, and the magnetic north one, things like that are calculated locally on your computer when you do certain things like say, I want some lines. Then it runs some code that I wrote in this plugin, and that figures out where the lines should be. And
So would you search for a Qgis plugin or something, or Qgis layer? I don't know. How would you find these things?
well, so there are many file formats. You can get GIS files that can be imported into QGIS from lots and lots of different places. Like one such place is, I think it's called Natural Earth. Free vector and raster map data. And there's a lot of cool stuff that you can get here. So in many cases, you can just download the file and drag and drop it into QGIS if it's the appropriate format, and it'll just show up, and then it becomes a layer. So for instance, wind turbines is an example I've used before. I think we have them here. No, maybe not. Where did maybe I was just Googling for wind turbines. See if they're here. Yeah, wind turbine data. I found this Googling around one day, and you can actually download wind turbine data in GeoJSON format, which is a popular format. It's supported by QGIS. So now I've just downloaded a zip file, unzipped it. It has GeoJSON file inside it. And I'm going to just drag and drop that into QGIS. And with any luck, it'll show up. It's given me a spinning pizza, so it's doing something. It's really taken its time. Yeah, let's drag this up to the top. It got buried. And here, it's really, are there any wind turbines in the Bay Area? Just curious. I don't see any net right now.
There are a lot of them.
If you
There's-
go up the Delta, look past Point San Pablo and get up past Carquinez Strait. Yeah, Fairfield. Yeah, a little bit to the right of that. Yeah, right there. There they
There we
are.
go. There they are. Yeah, there they
Yeah.
are.
Or go down to Livermore. You'll find a lot there.
Well,
too.
anyway, so
Oh.
yeah, here we've got some, and you know, this is the layer that we just pulled in.
Oh, whoops. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's okay. And there's a tool called Identify. If you use the Identify tool and click on something, it'll tell you all about it. So, oh, you have to actually highlight the layer that you're trying to identify. So let's identify a wind turbine. Yeah, so it's telling us all about this turbine, who owns it and how high it is, and you know, how many megawatts I guess it generates. Well, anyway, this is an example of the kind of stuff you can do in QGIS. You could pull this in, and of course you can superimpose that on your nav chart. So actually, I like to use turbines for navigation sometimes. Honestly, they're really visible and big. So we don't have huge farms of them here like you do.
A question, Joe, since the PDF that you created shows a lot more detail than the map window that you were looking at before creating it,
Yeah,
can you simply do a print preview before you create the PDF to see what it's going to show?
you can, but it takes as long as making the PDF.
Okay.
They're supposed to fix this in a future version of QGIS so that it actually shows the right resolution. But now I want to talk about something else you can do with Noaa charts that is pretty cool and I think pretty important. So going back to we're going to go back to our main window. And yeah, here we are looking at stuff we were a second ago. I'm going to turn these pesky grid lines and turbines off. They're slowing everything down. By the way, you can see there's a little rectangle. I don't know if it's visible. That shows, that's the outline of the layout that we have open. So it's kind of like showing us, oh, this is where your layout is. It's all, I can hardly see it on my own screen, so I don't know how well you can see it. Anyhow, all of this stuff is assembled from paper maps with different numbers at different scales. And a very powerful thing we can do here is actually pick the maps that we want to use to make our custom chart. So I'm going to take out the raster chart maps and just put in OpenStreetMap because it's less cluttered. And if we pull back a little bit, you can kind of see, here's the mosaic of all the different paper charts that cover this area. And if you expand this layer, you can see it's got a little kind of expando triangle next to it. I've actually separated out the different charts at different scales. So you can kind of see there's different color rectangles for the different scales. Let's say we're just only interested in 1 to 20,000. So here's the 1 to 20,000 coverage of these areas. And it may be that we don't want to just take what Noaa gives us in terms of what scales it thinks we want. For instance, going back to this PDF, we didn't really dwell on this, but if we blow up this area, you can see a weird seam in it. You see that where everything changes from like pretty chunky numbers to suddenly really tiny ones. And that's because the same scales aren't available everywhere. So Noaa will sometimes just give you, you know, a more detailed thing in one place and a less detailed thing in somewhere else. And that can sometimes make your chart really hard to read. So actually, I'm going to recant. Instead of 1 to 20,000, let's stick with 1 to 40,000 and say, we just want straight 1 to 40,000 which is kind of an overview level map. It's nice. It's got buoys and markers, but it's not so detailed that you can't read it on your deck. And that's the one I want to download. Okay. So to download a specific map using this template, turn on the raster chart downloads layer so you can see all these shapes. You have to pick the identify tool and right click the shape you're interested in. If you overlay more than one, you'll get a choice of which shape you're talking about. So I right click and now I've got a chart. I've got a choice. I can preview the chart or I can download it and add a layer for this specific chart. Well, let's do preview and see what we get. That sends us to Noaa's previewer, and we can kind of get a quick overview and see, oh, is this the kind of level of detail we want? Yeah, I like that. It's not too detailed, but it's still got the buoys. It's still got some depth info. I'm going with that. All right. Back to QGIS. Now I'm going to download it. So I pick download, and this takes maybe about 30 to 60 seconds to download it and then clip off what I discovered cartographers call the marginalia. Such a nice word. All that stuff around the edge that you don't really want to see in your custom layout because we're already adding grids and scale bars and whatnot. So this clips them off and saves the result as a file near where your project is. So should be about done. Spoke too soon. Come on, little computer. Well, it's good that you're seeing this so you won't worry that your own one is stuck. There we go. So now we've got a new layer here. San Francisco, it's titled San Francisco Entrance over here. And that layer is nothing but this map. If we can turn everything else off, that's all we're going to see. And if we go over to our layout and refresh it, I think it did refresh, you can now see the layout is showing the real resolution. That's because we're no longer looking at this sort of dynamic patchwork of tiles that Noaa has been serving us. Now we're looking at that specific chart at that specific scale. And when we export it, which one I'll do, we'll call it out the gate 2 or 1 to 40K. This version of it will not have that strange seam in it. It will all be in one uniform scale. So this ability to download specific charts, I think is a real winner. Here's our revised one. This is the one that we got earlier. And you can see it changes to kind of illegible and tiny on the right. And this is the one we just made. Trying to get it to zoom the same. I don't know why it's not. Anyway, yeah, you can see the seam is not there. It's all at the same scale because it's all coming from the same map. So this is maybe a good break point. Any questions about this part of it?
So if you have a place where you have two charts of the same scale,
yeah,
and they overlap a little bit, and you really need to get both of them in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible also?
Yeah, I mean, we can try it. Let's turn this off. Go back here. What's an example of that? Maybe
Well, there, you've got that right there. Look at San Pablo Bay and turn. There we go. See, it's overlapped. Oh, wait a minute.
These overlap. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. But the one between that shows San Pablo and San Rafael, there are two of them that overlap there as well.
Yeah, there's two that overlap. And if you download both of them, well, one of them will be on top of the other, and you get to pick, which is on top of which, but they will match exactly. There will be
Okay.
no visible, mismatch or anything
Uh-huh.
because everything gets aligned and scaled perfectly by QGIS so that it's all superimposed. Like, if we zoom in on the thing we just downloaded, say, and look at this edge here,
Yeah.
when I turn that on, you're going to see it matches exactly.
Well, yeah.
There's no seam.
Of course,
So-
these are flat maps and a curved surface. They're not going to be perfect.
Well, these are flat maps on a Mercator. They're Mercator projections on a Mercator projection.
Right.
So the projections are the same.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that QGIS does that's really important is it slightly stretches and distorts all the maps to make them fit. And we don't really see that. We're looking at a small piece of the globe, but that's important that it does that. It's not just cutting and pasting images, it's actually stretching them and warping them slightly.
So from this window to the where the layout is, the project is basically, you just click on the name like San Francisco entrance, and
Not
then
sure.
you refresh.
Oh,
I mean,
if you want to see that, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever layers you have on, I'm going to turn on that map. And if I just go to the layout,
and then you refresh.
you refresh. There's a refresh icon up here, refresh view. If I click that, it syncs it to whatever layers are showing.
Okay.
There's also a thing you can do called lock layers on the map that will cause it to always show those layers, even if you change the main map. So that's something else you can do.
So each time you do a layout, it memorizes that can you go back to the where you, yeah. So I see here the San Francisco entrance now is one layer.
Mhm.
So each time you create a new map will be there, or once you close the program and you reopen it?
Oh, it'll remember where all the layouts go. Each layout has its own memory of where it is. And that's stored in the project. Like if you save, let's save the project now, save.
Oh, okay.
That's going to save where
So, okay.
all the information about the layouts, what's in them, where they're pointed, how big, how zoomed in they are, the title, the scale, all that stuff. What is separate, though, there are things that are separate. So if we look at the folder where all this stuff is getting saved, you'll see that downloading the map has created this additional folder. And in that folder is an image file. And that image file is actually the downloaded map. So there are files that go along with the project that need to be kept track of.
Joe, what happens when you click on a tide station?
Oh yeah, well, I should talk about that. So remember what we did with let's turn on the tide stations. When you click on a tide station using the identify tool, you get various choices. You could pick which of these stations you're interested in, and you'll get kind of you'll get an identify window showing you everything about that station. And you also get some links that take you to the actual NOAA website for that station. So that's extremely handy.
Yeah, so one of the things I thought about playing around with was creating an app that I could download to my Garmin watch, where I could be on the bay and do something like this, and then be able to look up in real time the wind and the tide or currents in
Yeah.
real time. And I mean, going to a link is one thing, I guess. I mean, that's not bad. Just takes me to a link though, which might be hard with. Anyway, something I was thinking. I know that Garmin, you could do that kind of thing using these type of tools.
Yeah, you can do it on your smartphone too. I mean, there's apps like Fish Currents that, you know, will show you the live currents. And I'm actually working, I'll show it to you now. This is kind of a prototype, but I'm working on a program that does built into QGIS that, whoops, should have thought about that. Yeah, I'll have to, as I said, it's a prototype. It's not really quite working yet, but oh, I know what I did wrong. It does something similar to the BASK trip planner, basically. It's very similar to that. So yeah, if we pull this up, you can see the arrow filling in there. This is just like very similar to what you'd see on Fish Currents.
Yeah. So
and
that's,
if you click a station, you'll see the graph for it, and you can kind of play with the graph and play with time and so forth. And it shows you a tide table. So I'm kind of trying to integrate more current information into this. And of course, if you go to your layout, you know, and refresh the layout, you'll see some information that needs to be filtered to a specific time. So there's still work left to do, but you get the idea.
I get, so Joe, that's excellent. Garmin has apps, and they have, like, for the watch, they have tide and current apps, and they're okay, but going with this direction, you could really end up with a great app.
You can. I mean, I think what I would do, honestly, is I would print out a custom chart for the specific date I was going out, and for, you know, key times, and I would just have that on my deck, because I hate dealing with electronics when I'm paddling. So, but that's just me.
No, I absolutely agree. I'm thinking more as just an app with your name on it, Joe. It's like, you know, you don't have to use it, but anyways.
Yeah.
So when NOAA deprecates the paper maps, what are the vector maps going to look like?
Good question. We need to get to that next. Let me just see if I've left out anything important before we transition to that topic. Let's see. Talked about all this stuff. We've gone much faster than my first version of this did, so that's nice. That we did that. Oh, well, we haven't talked about routes yet. I think we should do that. Yeah, let's talk about that. So I'm going to turn off this current stuff. So one of the nice things you can do in QGIS is add your own route layers. And that's another feature of this Compass Routes plugin that we were talking about before. So I'm going to create a route layer now. Here it is. It's just called routes. There's nothing in it yet. And when you have the route layer, when you select it, you can add features to it. Features are the things that you see in these layers that consist of shapes and points and so forth. So like, for instance, current stations are kind of a feature, or the magnetic north lines, they're features. So routes are also features, and they're line features. And once you create a route layer, you can use this add line feature command. It's under the edit menu, add line feature. And I will now add a line. And it automatically labels that line with the nautical mile length and magnetic bearing. So if you know where you're going and you're planning a route, you can add any number of features that will show you what compass heading you are going to wind up taking. So we cross from this buoy to this buoy. And also, of course, this will show up on your layout. So I like to make custom maps, for pretty much any trip that is going to require this kind of planning. I don't bother reusing the ones I printed. I just make a new one. So that is another thing you can do with the same plugin that gives you the magnetic north lines. And you can see that it somehow knows, what the magnetic field is doing at various points on the map. So it made sense to package both of those in one thing.
Question,
Yeah.
is there a way to import a collection of waypoints that you may have created?
Yes,
It's
there
a
is.
GPX file?
Absolutely. You can import a GPX file. I think that's under, where is that? Down here at the bottom left is this mysterious little box that says type to locate. And if you can't remember where a feature is, and in a program with this many little icons and menus, it's easy to forget where things are. You can just type the name of something in here and see if it comes up. I'm going to type GPX. That didn't work. How about GPS? I know I've imported GPX files, but I can't remember exactly how I did it. GPS tools. Look at that. Yes, load GPX file. So if I had one, which I don't happen to have one, but if I did, I could bring it in and it would become a layer. So yes, you can totally bring in GPX files. There's also a measurement tool. And this is, it's a little bit like the route layer that I just told you, but it doesn't make a layer. It just totes up mileage. So if you just temporarily, want to see how far it is from something to something else, this will do that for you. There's a zillion plugins that do a zillion things. And I feel like I have no idea, what great things are out there, but there's quite a lot. All right, anything else before we move on and talk about what Noaa's up to and sort of where things are going? If not, we'll do that. So actually 1 minute break and I'm gonna get a glass of water, which I badly need. Be right back.
What a great instruction. Thank you.
Who is that?
So I should mute myself here.
Somebody was saying on some Zoom call or other that I was on the other day that that's the new etiquette is you have to introduce your cat. because it'll introduce itself sooner or later. Okay, let's transition to talk about what NOAA's doing. It was really something listening to the NOAA people today. I mean, it really gave me a sense of how responsible they are for a lot of sort of really huge things going on across the planet and the country, and they really feel the weight of that responsibility. I mean, the safety of global shipping depends on what they do. So this transition is very, very difficult for them, and they're trying to take all these different interests into account, and they don't have infinite resources, of course. So we're going to look at their print on demand tool, and I guess I'll try to send out a follow-up with some of these URLs relating to NOAA custom charts. So the NOAA custom chart viewer, when you first come to it, looks like this. And you can zoom in, and it's quite similar to zooming and panning in QGIS, actually. So let's find our way back to sort of more or less the same place. All right, so here we are, kind of the same place. And you can see it looks pretty different. If you've ever used like a, Navionics or some electronic chart display instrument, this probably looks familiar because this is the style. And it's pretty different. They're trying to harmonize it and make it more like the paper charts over time. But right away, there are some things about this that make it flexible in ways that are more similar to what you would find in QGIS than what you would find in a paper chart. So right away, there's a whole settings panel. So let's see. You can change, things about where the contours are drawn and where the tinting is for safety. We don't, as kayakers, we don't really care too much about that, maybe, but it does help outline the shallow and the deep areas. And you can play with the different definitions of deep. So if I think deep is 100 meters, I'm probably going to get, I thought I would get something different. Doesn't seem to be changing, does it? Oh, that changed something. Well, I don't really know how this works, and I've never played with that part. Here we have kind of some controls over level of detail of the map that we're looking at. So I can say I want to see everything you've got, NOAA, or maybe I want just an overview level. That's not very useful for us, is it? Kind of lame. That's for really zoomed out maps. Or general. There's a bridge there. Not much else that we know, just a bridge. Coastal. Approach. Harbor, which is kind of what we were just looking at. And berthing. I guess I don't really know what berthing is good for. Anyway, these are sort of like different levels of detail that you can pick. So let's go with harbor because it's got a lot of stuff. So you can also change things like, do I want meters or feet? I want feet. Label contours. I don't really think that is super helpful. Area symbolization. I've never played with this or not, but I see it sort of changes the style of the boundaries of different areas. And you can turn compass roses on and off. So they've got some ability to tailor the nature of the display you're looking at. And these are just layers, really. They're layers like you would get in any GIS program, but they've put a little UI on them. So how do you make a custom chart with this thing? Well, you go to an area called print settings, and you actually have to tell it the number of the scale you want. Well, let's go with 40,000 again. Or actually, what was the scale we used in the QGIS layout? I think it was 50,000. Let's do that. And we'll say we want, you can pick your paper size. They don't have 11 by 17, unfortunately. They're going to, but they don't yet. We'll just stick with letter size. And we're going to add, they call add an extent. So it says click to add an extent. So I'm going to click there. And it's doing something, although it's not telling us that it is. And eventually we'll get a box. We zoom out. This box shows us the area that's going to be printed when we print. And it's kind of a big box. It's a little bit bigger than I think we need for our out the gate. So I think I'm actually going to get rid of this one. How do I get rid of it? I guess that's how. There's a whole, they have a whole video on how to use this, so I'm not going to explain it in detail. I more want to illustrate what it can do. So let's make this a little more detailed, 25,000, which will give us a smaller box, cover, but with more detail for the area that we're focusing on. I think I clicked. There's no feedback to tell me that it's doing anything. Oh, sorry. Let's try that again. Maybe I didn't click. Oh, I have to select this tool thing again here that says make a new extent. Not super clear. There we go. There's our box. Okay, so sorry, was there a question?
Can you move it around?
Yeah, you can move it around with this hand tool. You can say, oh, I want to move it there or there. I don't know if you can actually just change this number. I don't think you can. No. Once you've placed it, it sort of sticks with its scale. Okay, then you have to go to this other panel called Export Q. And this is our chart that we have, chart 7. And now I can say I want to export it. So I'm going to submit it. And it takes a really long time. But it's going to make a PDF for us of this area. And while it's doing that, we'll go back to QGIS. I want to point out that all that data that's in the new charting system is also available in QGIS. So here we have kind of the same thing in a different layer from the one we were using before. And in the future, when, some distant future, when they both retire all the paper charts and we get sick of them because they're too out of date, we'll probably be doing things this way in QGIS instead. So same data, but it's actually a little worse looking in QGIS, and I'm not sure exactly why. They seem to be, the data is following different pathways to get to different places. So I'm not sure exactly what that's all about. And you can have a dialogue with them. They're actually very responsive. And I've been going back and forth with them a lot about this stuff. They do write back. The export is still going very, very slowly. I'll mention something else, which is I think we can actually take the initiative and download a whole lot of the nice raster maps while they're still available, and then we'll have them in QGIS ready to go whenever we want them. And that's a nice thing. So that's probably not a terrible idea. Grab the maps you want now. They're going to start taking them away gradually beginning January. And that process will extend over 4 years. So it's not instant, but they're not telling us anything about when they're taking them away. So getting a copy of everything you want is not terrible. Okay, the export's finally over and we can look at our custom chart. Here it is. It's pretty clean looking. It does that have everything that I expected? Yeah, I guess it does. I guess we moved the box, right? I moved the box when I was showing you how to move the box. So I mean, it's very crisp. And you can see that it's got, all the typical Noaa stuff. It's got a nice scale bar. It's good looking, very, very sharp. It's not a, I beg your pardon?
Can you put routes?
No, well, no, because this is just a PDF that they made for us. And that's the reason why you might still want to keep using QGIS, even with this data set, is you can put routes here. We can put a routes layer here over that data. And, this is the new data, but all those QGIS layer features just work the same, just over a different stuff in the background.
What happens if you layer on OpenStreetMaps?
Well, that means you have to make something transparent, right? Because both of those are opaque layers. So you could play some kind of game by, and here I'll show you something you can do. You can say, here's some way to make this.
There's another.
There's a way to make it transparent, but I forget how.
There's another project called OpenSeaMap, which I don't know how that fits in this either.
Yeah, last time I looked at that, it wasn't very good. It certainly didn't have the kind of coverage of the US that Noaa does.
Yeah, right. No. A lot more popular in Europe where the charts are not free.
Right. They're all going the same way as Noaa, by the way. All these countries are having to figure out how they're going to get rid of paper. And yeah, we're lucky not to have to pay for this stuff. It's really pretty great. To pay for lots of other things that they don't have to pay for in other countries. Don't get me started. So here's our PDF, and it comes with extra bits, like all the notes that you may have seen on regular paper charts are now on separate pages. Right. And we can save this. Let's save it to our downloads folder. And here's a kind of cool thing that you can do also. You can actually take your downloaded PDF and you can put it in QGIS and it'll just become a layer. This doesn't work with most PDFs. It does work with the ones that Noaa makes because they're specially geo-referenced. So that's kind of useful. But, as you can see, it's not really different data from what you would get some other way. It's just gives you a little more control over what details are included and not. By the way, there's lots of sub-layers you can turn on in this new stuff. So there's quite a lot of flexibility to it that the paper charts didn't have.
Have you ever explored OpenCPN?
A big OpenCPN. Yeah, I've looked at OpenCPN. I find OpenCPN sort of, I mean, QGIS isn't easy to use, but OpenCPN is even harder, I think. And it's very difficult to get Noaa charts into it. Like I've spent my whole life dealing with complicated software, but OpenCPN just made me, I mean, I don't have any hair, but I would have wanted to tear it out if I did.
Joe, can I ask a question about QGIS?
Yeah, sure.
Just a high level question. So Nikon cameras allow you to download the GIS data of your pictures.
Oh yeah, right.
And so I was wondering, and it works great on the Nikon app, but I was wondering, like, you have a great route map, and it would be fun to go back to your route map and then download where you actually went in the pictures. It's a good way to document caves, right? Because, what was this cave? Where was it located? And all that kind of stuff. So my question is, have you played with that? And when it downloads the GIS data, is it just downloading a location, or is it also embedding the photo?
Well, you could put photos in. They would be more at home in a layout, because on a map, a photo is just an image, and the actual rectangular image itself, it kind of doesn't belong on a map in a certain way. It has a location, but QGIS wouldn't know where to put the rectangle of the image itself. That would be sort of a human decision. So if you made a layout, like let's make a layout just really quick. Here's our layout of that same area. So you can do things like put an image in here. I think this is an image. Yeah, you can have a raster image, and I could actually, I'm not going to do it here, but I could put a photo there and, put that photo wherever I want on this map. So in a layout, it's a little more like just a draw program. You can put arrows.
Well, so I guess my question, Joe, is if I download the GIS data and import it as a layer, then it would show it as a feature, each location.
Yeah, you get a waypoint. You get a waypoint or something.
So then when you click on the point, I was wondering if I could, I don't know what the GIS data is. It's including the picture. So if I click on the point, would it show the picture, or would I have to have a vector pointing to a folder where the pictures were?
I just haven't tried it, so I don't know. I mean, worst comes to worst, you could copy and paste the latitude and longitude and get a waypoint that way. But I haven't tried that. It's worth Googling it. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it. It seems like something people would have tried to do.
Right.
So if you wanted to move the compass rose around, or you just have to use the plugin that creates on the fly a compass rose where you want it.
Yeah, let's see if I can find that, since it's the second time it's come up. Rose. Oh, magnetic declination. That's the one. Is that installed? Do I have it? No, I don't. So let's install it. Well, now you're going to see how to install a plugin.
Yeah.
All right. So now I have that plugin. It's on my toolbar now. And I can say, it's a little clunky. It's a multi-step process. You have to go to the Calculate tab, say latitude and longitude for map, click the map. Then I click Calculate, and it figures out the magnetic declination. And then I can say draw compass rose. And I have to kind of, I'm not exactly sure how it decided that that's where it was going to put it, but now I've got a compass rose.
Well,
and it's in a layer.
Actually.
It's in its own layer.
It picked that location because that's where you clicked when you said calculate, and it calculated it for that spot exactly.
Oh yeah, you've used this thing, Margot, right? Well, all right. So that is, I think, how it works. And it
So
puts,
then that is fixed. If you want to, if you made a mistake, you gotta erase that layer and do another one in the right place.
exactly. What's more, it doesn't save this layer. Like, you may notice some of these layers have a little mark. It looks like almost like an old school integrated circuit or something. That means it's a temporary layer. So when you see that, you need to click that, and then you can pick a file name and, save it in a file. So that's important to know, that there are things that are saved outside your project. And if we save the project now, the compass rose will not come back. It won't be there anymore. But yeah, that's how this thing works. This one does a compass rose in you can't just move it also, because the data in it would actually change.
Yeah, right.
This one will have, this one will probably have a different, oh, it has the same declination.
Yeah.
Anyway, it wasn't far enough away, but if it had been, it would have a different
So there
variation.
must have been a size option in there somewhere.
Well, when I was dragging it around and it was showing me that cross, I had the option to make the cross bigger or smaller by just moving my mouse.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
if you like compass roses, you can make them that way.
Yeah. But that's actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Can you show again where was the plugin download? The plugin, where did you go?
Plugins, the plugin menu. And the very
plugin.
first thing is manage and install plugins. And if you want to get my plugin, you have to change this show experimental plugins. You have to check that off. There's a zillion of them, most of them. Many of them are kind of broken or old.
Yeah.
So, the open source plugin world.
Right.
Speaking of open source, Qgis is free, of course, but they would love to get money. So if you find it useful, I encourage people to give them some, because people actually spend their time making it better. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually what I got. We're moving kind of fast.
Awesome stuff.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what can you say about topographic maps? Have you looked at that?
You mean in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, is there something similar to the Noaa charts that I can do the same sort of thing for hiking?
Have you, by the way, have you looked at Topo on the web?
I'm familiar with them. I have not played much with QGIS, so.
Well, Topo is a web tool. It's free also. And Topo is a really pretty nice thing on the web. Here we are looking at it. They have marine charts too, but their printing and kind of data manipulation, I think, are not as good as QGIS. You can't make a custom chart that looks as nice as, well, what you can do here. But let's look at what you can do. I like this tool because it has very good topo stuff. So you can get USGS topo maps in here. Where were they?
Somewhere.
That's funny. Oh, here we go. Base layers. So scanned topos. Yeah, so this is like USGS.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other topographic stuff. There's also, OpenStreetMap. It has some topo information, and I think that you can get different layers that you can bring in that have different degrees of topographic relief. I don't know much about that, so that's something separate that could be looked into. But I don't do a lot with that. So
does QGIS have a export to a Garmin format that you can put in your Garmin GPS?
I think there's a upload the GPS. Yes, there is a way to do that.
Uh-huh.
I have not used it.
That's very handy.
And you pick a layer that you want to upload, send out, and I don't know why it's not letting me
Yeah.
choose anything here. But
I've tried OpenCMap for this, and it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
yeah. Well, hope this is going to be useful for you folks.
This is great.
It's great. It's exact. It's
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the thing about GIS data and QGIS, you might as well be God.
Why do you say that, Margot?
Oh, it just makes you feel like God. You know, you're creating the world, you're looking at it, you know, you change it when you want.
Yeah, you're like a bird. Sort of go anywhere. It is cool to be able to look at things from all these different perspectives.
Yeah.
well, I also think it's a tool that could really open up a lot of opportunities if you wanted to develop and a market. I mean, there's all different things you could do with this tool.
Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of commercial players in this area. There are more and more of them. But I'm kind of interested mostly in what I can do for people in the paddling community. It's not as big.
Question. You know, deep zoom. Deep zoom is
Yeah.
you were playing with so basically you were trying to recreate what with the current
Yeah.
what deep zoom is. So we can't use any of the deep zoom is just locked in. We cannot get any of that inside there.
Well, no, but I'm building that current plugin that I showed you, and I think that's
Yeah.
going to be ready for use maybe in a month or so.
Okay.
It's a lot of it's turning out to be a lot of work, and what it does is it downloads all that data from Noaa actually, and
Yeah.
then displays it in QGIS, and it's kind of a big project. You know, Joe Pedalino didn't make the trip planner overnight, so I'm hard at work on that when I get the time. So I think in a few weeks I'll probably have something that other people can use. But right now it's a little too. You saw it's still a little bit fragile.
Okay.
Right.
I know something else I didn't show that probably is worth just spending a second on, which is you can have more than one map in a layout, and that's quite useful to be able to do. So here's a map, and maybe we want to have like another map that's a blow up of some other area, or maybe part of this area because we want to see more detail. So we can add like a second map here. Actually, let's just take this map, copy it, and paste it, and we'll have a second map. And we can have this map be a detail. So maybe we really want to see like exactly what's going on near the bridge. So that's an example of the kind of thing you can do with multiple maps. You can make your own kind of insets.
So in order to use OpenStreetMaps, do you have to first download it as a plugin, or is it sort of inherent in QGIS?
It's not, none of this, absolutely nothing that you see is inherent in QGIS here. So I brought in the OpenStreetMap layer, which is loaded from, some URL somewhere on the web. So that because it's useful to have here. And there are other maps you can bring in, but I tried to bring in sort of the minimum necessary to kind of support this kind of use of QGIS, but there's lots and lots of open source map servers out there that you can include if you're so inclined.
Thank you.
if you wanted to do the two maps, where the two maps are different, how do you get a different map, a second different map? Because right now you just copy and paste.
By different, you mean different areas or
Yeah,
different,
different area.
different content? So this
Different
map,
area.
well, so this map, we can just actually, whoops. Let's refresh this. Well, you can just move this around. It can go anywhere. It's independent.
But if I want something that is not part of that map, it's a completely different area. Different,
Yeah, I mean, so
island. Yeah.
yeah, okay, so an island. Yeah, let's go all the way out to, where's the Farallones? Are they out here somewhere?
It doesn't matter, anywhere.
Well, let's just say over here. This is
Yeah.
far enough away, okay? So
Yeah.
we'll go over here and we'll sync just this map to that area. Okay.
Oh, so you just sync, so you
Yeah, it's
click
just like
the-
a different, it's completely independent of the map to the left. It has its own grid. It's everything. You can also lock, the lock layers feature is quite important. So let's lock the layers of this map over here to whatever they were when we made that map. Oh, that's the one on the right that I just locked. Very well. And the one on the left, let's say we want that to be satellite imagery. So you can really mix and match in a layout and sort of have different maps that also have different content.
So basically you go on the map, you have basically highlighted the map, and then you move back to the, whatever it's called, the other screen.
The map
change.
view. Yeah,
The
this
map
is where you
view.
control what layers are visible. Then you come in here and you sync the map, and then you do this
Yeah, yeah.
lock
Okay.
layers thing over here. That freezes the set of layers that are visible. There's also a thing called an atlas that I'm starting to use more, where you can actually draw rectangles on the main screen, and it'll make a series of maps, each of which is pointed at one of those rectangles. But that's a little too involved to go into right now here.
Wow. This is great.
Well, thank you. I will try to follow up in the next few days with a few links to the latest stuff that Noaa is doing, so you guys can check that out. And yeah, happy to take email questions up to a point if I can answer them. But I'm going to keep working on this stuff, updating the website, and I will post a buzz if I have any major things to announce, like the Currents plugin or whatever. I'll keep you guys posted.
One last question. When we close the program and we open it again, it starts from, Boston.
Well, you have to save the project.
Save the project, and then basically you can go to that project, and then it starts from that project.
Right. I'm gonna close this now. Notice that I haven't saved all my temporary layers, but let's ignore that. Am I sure I want to proceed? Yes. So now I'm going to reopen Qgis. And let's open recent. We'll open the project we just had.
Okay.
We should just see exactly what we saw before.
Yeah. Okay.
And our layout should be there too. I forget which one I was using, but it should look the same.
Hey, I have a question maybe following this point.
Yeah.
So let's say we did a certain map and layout and we like it. And in the future, we may want to repeatedly use this, but updating, more up-to-date information. Is there a way this tool allow us to not interactively, but as a script, for example, just rerun it again?
I didn't quite understand the question. What would the script do?
So if I produce certain kind of map I like, right? But let's say I pick a layer, the layer shows today's information. And a month from now, I want to do exactly the same map again by using the future day's information instead. It will be repeating exactly the same map. Would it be able to run some kind of script and produce it without me having to go into the interact mode again?
What would be changing from one date to the next?
So I see one of the layer, could it be the current?
Oh yeah, well, sure. So when you save a project, it's going to save a whole lot of data about your project. And when it comes to the current stuff, at least for my plugin, it should remember, it's going to remember the date that you were interested in also in the project. And you can move that date forward and back. You could always save a copy of the project focused on different dates and leave everything else the same. So that would probably be quite efficient. Like you would just open the project you had saved before for whatever trip it was, or whatever area of interest. And then just advance the calendar to some other date and you would get the updated information for that time.
Great.
I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Yeah. That would definitely do it. I was thinking that as a tool itself, does it allow some kind of programming, I guess?
It allows a lot of programming. Like a lot of stuff you see here was programmed by me in Python and sort of saved in. It's very, very programmable. You can do almost anything you can think of with the objects that are in there. And it manipulates time. There's a whole thing called temporal controls that lets you kind of like, set up time frames, and you can even make animations, and it's very involved.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to go sleep. I got to get on the water early tomorrow with some people. So I look forward to seeing you all somewhere for real for soon.
Thank you so much. This was excellent presentation.
Yeah.
Very clear.
Thank you. I'm glad. I hope you found it useful, and it's really a pleasure to share it with you all.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you.
See you on the water and in the ether.
Good night, Joe. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.